Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host, as always. Joining me today is a very special guest, Mr. Brett Kollmann. You know him from the Bootleg Football Show, as well as his own film room channel, doing some great work with EJ and solo work as well. We're pumped to have him on. Brett, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
I'm good. It's funny to prepare for this show. I was reviewing the Chargers class once again, make sure I didn't forget anything. And still love it. A few weeks later, still love it. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, that is a good sign. You and EJ obviously did your favorite 6 classes on the Bootleg Football Show. Was that yesterday that it came out?
Oh man, everything's a blur at this point.
I know. We were just talking about like how still recovering from post draft, but anyways, the Bootleg Football Show did 6 favorite class, and the Chargers class was mentioned. We're gonna dive into a lot of that today and talk about some general expectation stuff as well. But I gotta ask. I wanted to pick your. I didn't put this on the sheet, so I'm putting you kind of on the spot here. But the combine footage that you got to shoot this year was incredible. I mean, you got to be right there with the Xavier Worthy 40-yard dash, the Joe Milton moonball. What was that like? Like looking back on that, like what kind of experience was that for you? And then I also wanted to ask you if you could kind of like time machine this and pick like 3 workouts from the combine that you could go into that same position and record. Who would you choose for that?
It was honestly an insane experience, and even the NFL. They didn't even realize when we got there what they were going to be able to get. Because what people don't know is the NFL Combine is not actually run by the NFL. It's run by like a separate entity that runs the Combine, and it's a whole there's like a Hydra thing.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and so the NFL was like, I mean, we're going to try to see what we can do, and we'll kind of figure it out day of. And because it was Google, it was NFL, it was the organization that runs the combine, everybody's had their hands in this thing. And so we show up, and then NFL hands me and EJ these 2, the black NFL media vests that you see on the sidelines at games. They're like, Here, you got these. And I was like, are you serious? And you realize where this lets me go, right? And they're like, oh yeah, no, we didn't anticipate this, but they gave us these. And so I was like, so I can like roam around in the field and shoot whatever I want. And like, you can shoot whatever you want. You can get as close as you want, as long as you're not in the way. And so I was like, okay, so if I just check with the people running the drills and I check with all the trainers and everything like that, and I like, before I get into my positions before each drill, and they say, yes, I can be there. They're like, as long as they clear it, you can do whatever you want to do. And so I was wandering around my camera for 4 days, like literally 5 feet from these guys. Like I set up honestly, I was on TV for a lot of it because I was so close to these players. And I remember I set up my wide angle. God, I was 6 feet behind the quarterbacks throwing, and I had my camera just down there, right, recording like slow-mo. And I set my camera like at the cone where the receivers were doing their drills, and so they would cut like right off the camera. It was unreal. Like it was absolutely unreal. I went up to people running the 40 like before Xavier Worthy was going to run, because I knew he was going to go fast. And I was like, can I put my camera like right behind the starting line? And they're like, nobody's ever asked that before. And I was like, well, can I? And they're like, as long as you set it and you run away and you don't come back until the 40s are over. And so I just press record. I left it running for like 20-30 minutes. Of course, Xavier was the last one to go. But that's how I got that angle right behind the starting line, is I just went up and asked, and they said yes.
Wow. That's incredible. That kind of access is unparalleled, and I'm super glad that they had it. And Chargers fans, if you haven't watched that, please go check that out. So definitely wanted to ask you about that one. But we'll dive into the Chargers draft class here. You guys obviously have talked a lot about why you like the players, and why we've talked a lot about that as well. But we're going to get into a little bit more nitty gritty stuff here with Brett. And today's interview is, as always, brought to you guys by our friends over at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. You can get a deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com/guilty. Okay, so regarding Joe Alt, you guys love the player. We preferred other options, but we like the player a lot as well. Now that Joe Alt is a Charger, what do you make of his fit in like the Greg Roman offense?
It's a perfect fit. Honestly, he's the kind of tackle that fits everybody, right? Because he is so uniquely gifted that it doesn't matter what system you throw him in. If you want to be a predominantly zone-based running game, like, yeah, he can reach block a 5 technique. He can reach block a 6 technique, and you can get out wide if you really want to. If you want to pull him into space, he's nimble enough to do that. If you want to run primarily man concepts, he's just strong enough to do that and actually get a lot of displacement on the line of scrimmage. So it's not even about him fitting, because he would fit everywhere. It's fair. Just about the philosophy of building the offensive line and trusting that you have the guy at quarterback. And this is something that I've talked about in multiple places, but I'll bring it up here as well. Kansas City, the evil empire, Kansas City, when they traded away Tyreek Hill, they did it because they knew they had the guy at quarterback. And the guy at quarterback elevates receivers. Offensive line is what elevates the guy. And so you kind of start there, right? And, when they went to the Super Bowl and they got absolutely pantsed by Tampa, it's because they didn't have offensive line. It's not because they didn't have weapons. It's not because they didn't have quarterbacks. It's because they didn't have an offensive line. And what did that get them? Embarrassed, right? So they come back the next year. They invest a lot in the offensive line. Shortly after that, Tyreek gets traded because they invest that money elsewhere on the defense to make sure that, they're not having to get in shootouts every single week, to make sure their field position on average is better because they have the guy. If you protect the guy, you give him shorter fields, you don't make him score 35 a game, you trust that he can make it work with whatever he's got out there to throw to. And that is what has led to them winning 2 straight Super Bowls, despite them not really having a great passing game overall. And they sat back and said, who cared? We're the best team in the league. And they were right? And, when Harbaugh was with the 49ers and he led them to conference championships, it was the same thing. They weren't like a super flashy passing game, but they had great average field position. They played great defense. They ran the ball well, and they protected their quarterback. So philosophically, I'm still not – I am not in agreement with the Chargers fans that are upset by it, because we just watched a team in this division win 2 straight Super Bowls doing that same thing. And if you think that Justin Herbert is the guy, which he is, why wouldn't you try to do the same thing that Kansas City did? That's clearly worked. That's what Harbaugh's trying to do. He's literally trying to do the same thing that your biggest division rival did. So what's the problem here?
Yeah, I think a lot of it probably stems from who they lost at wide receiver specifically, more so than like being anti-Joe Alt, I would say. I had Joe Alt and Malik Neighbors graded like pretty closely. I wasn't like this would be, Malik Neighbors or bust territory, but that is how a lot of fans felt listening to the show. And I understand why, because I think the context of who they lost specifically was kind of like, okay, well, you're taking Keenan from us. That means you're going to give us Malik Neighbors, right? And that just that was never really obviously like the plan.
Would it make you feel better if, from what I understand, the only team that would have taken Malik in the top 10 is the Giants anyway, and they happen to be the one who took him? But I really don't think the NFL, other than that one team, I really don't think the NFL was as high on Malik as they were on Joe Alt.
I mean, that backs up what Adam Schefter was saying, how the Giants were trying to trade up for Alt and not a quarterback. So, yeah, that would have been interesting if they had been able to do that, how far Malik Neighbors would have fallen.
Because, I mean, if Rome and Malik were there at 9, it would have been Rome. The Jets still were going to go tackle. The Titans were going to go tackle. The Falcons were not going to go with Malik.
Obviously, the Falcons are pretty intent on Penix.
Right? But literally the only team that was going to take him in the top 10 was the Giants. And who knows if he would have gone at 11, 12, 13, 14. So I think he's a very good player. But the only receiver in this class that I think could have gone ahead of Alt is Marvin. And another thing I would say to Chargers fans, if you look at the package they got of Alt plus McConkey versus, let's say they took Malik Neighbors versus whatever tackle was going to be there later on, I don't think it's the same quality of package. So I think we have to look at it two ways. Number one, I think the media perception of Malik Neighbors is a little bit different than a lot of team perceptions, and he happened to go to like the perfect spot for him. That's great for him. But I also think if we're looking at roster building and the packages that you're going to get with highly valuable positions at their strongest point in the class, I kind of feel like the Chargers ended up with the best possible combination they could have gotten. So from a roster building perspective, I love what they did. And I think, like, if you told me that Ladd McConkey and Malik Neighbors were within 10 catches of each other at the end of the year and within 150 yards of each other at the end of the year, I'd believe it. Like, and so it's like, is an extra 10 catches and an extra 150 yards worth giving up Joe Alt? Not for me, at least.
Yeah, I think it's difficult for a lot of us to, have the vision of like the draft is more than one night, and there's so much excitement around night one. And I'm very guilty of this too. Like it's tough to see the vision, especially with the first year of a regime coming in. And so I think you zoom out now and you really love the Ladd McConkey selection. And I know that there are some fans who are worried about like the lack of production, and some fans worried about like the injury history. But you turn on the tape and like I think I watched maybe like one game where I wasn't like, oh my gosh, this guy's just making plays all over the place. And you watch the Florida tape, the Auburn tape, you watched Oregon from 2022, and Ladd is just making plays all over the place. For you, what does he look like in a Greg Roman offense? Because I think some people, like different coordinators, right? But I can kind of see like a Zay Flowers role-esque for him. Obviously the Ravens had Hollywood Brown for a bit. Is he that more of that field stretcher type for you, or what are you kind of envisioning for Ladd in his rookie season?
He is the changeup. And when I say that, I mean he's the changeup to the run game. Because if you're looking at, not to get too deep into the nitty gritty, but the reason why Roman likes receivers like Ladd McConkey, and especially because he's only going to have two receivers on the field most of the time. But the reason why he likes those kind of receivers is they get open and they get open quickly, especially if they're given free access to the line of scrimmage. Ladd McConkey runs really, really, really good outbreaking routes. Where that matters most is after, teams go up against this new Chargers offense and they get run on over and over and over and over again, they're essentially just going to default to cover 3, especially against 21 personnel, 12 personnel, all the big people packages. They're just going to play cover 3 because it's going to be their only real shot at stopping it. That's going to lead to corners playing significantly off, right? Mm-hmm. And if a corner is playing significantly off, I'm talking 7, 8, 9 yards off the line of scrimmage or off the receiver because they're in cover 3 and he's just playing his deep third, that gives Ladd McConkey the free access he needs to even no matter what route is called. If you give him sufficient space, he's the type of receiver where Justin looks over and he says, do your thing. And they just run speed 7s all day underneath those corners. And they just get free catches. They get free yards out of it until the corner then has to come back down, right? And that's when you can hit him with the double move, which we saw Ladd run at Georgia a lot. Like he had a really good double move. And so he's the changeup. We're going to get you to cover 3. The corner's going to back off a little bit. We're going to hit you with a bunch of speed outs. If you just give us the look for it, we'll get 7, 8 yards every single time until you bite on it. And then we're going to hit the big shot. So is he going to be the main thing? No, the main thing is going to be the run of the ball. Is he going to be the thing after the main thing? Yes. And that's why they took him, because you don't need Malik Neighbors to do that. You don't need Marvin Harrison to do that.
Yeah.
Like Ladd McConkey could do it just fine. You need Joe Alt to do the main thing. That's why they took him that high.
Yeah. I love the way that you put that. I think that's a great way to look at that. And Ladd I think he's going to be fantastic. And I think Justin is going to really gravitate towards him, because you mentioned the out routes and the 7s. one of my favorite things about Justin Herbert is how he attacks the hole shot area. You know, those post corner routes are just, it's one of his best throws that he consistently makes. So I'm excited about that particular pairing. We'll switch to the defensive side of things. You guys obviously really like Junior Colson. You really like Deion Henley. The Chargers bring in Denzel Perryman back in, I should say. Is that trio enough for you for the linebacker room? Because I know that Jesse Minter's defense it puts a lot on the plate of the linebackers. What are your kind of thoughts about that trio and how they might work together in this defense?
I think it depends on how much nickel they're going to play. I have to assume the starting two are going to be Junior and Deion, right? And then if they need to bring in another guy against, I wouldn't even say 12. I'm talking against like 13 or 22. Like when they really need Denzel, then they'll bring in Denzel. But I kind of feel like Junior and Deion are going to be on the field for the vast majority of the snaps together. And then I have a sneaking suspicion that we might see Derwin deployed a lot like Kyle Hamilton. Because, Baltimore, which ran a similar defense to, Jesse and McDonald run very, very similar defenses. Baltimore, if you look at how they deployed Kyle Hamilton, they stayed in nickel most of the time because they had a guy like Kyle Hamilton that could do it, in that he could do linebackery type stuff as a DB. He could cover in the slot. You could play him deep a little bit, which ironically at Notre Dame, I didn't think he was super great at that, but then he went to Baltimore and became a lot better at it.
He's a freak.
And Derwin's he's a freak, right? And Derwin's another one of those guys. It's like, if you want to play quarters, he can sit back there and do all the crazy nimble quarters stuff. If you want him to, be in the box, mix it up against the run, you want to be in the slot, you want him to blitz. And I kind of feel like Derwin's tailor-made to be their Kyle Hamilton, which means Denzel's probably not going to get a whole lot of snaps while Derwin's doing that kind of stuff. The real question is who wins the safety jobs with Derwin, like the other two, like actual safeties, right? That part I don't know yet. But I kind of feel like it's going to be a very nickel heavy defense, regardless of the personnel packages they're seeing.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I land as well. Mentioning nickel, I think we did not love the Tarheeb Still pick. That was kind of our one maybe blemish of the draft, but I know you guys were at the Shrine Bowl. You've seen him up close and personal. What can you tell us about like how you viewed Tarheeb Still and how he might fit in that role as well, complementing Derwin James?
He's another one of these. It's kind of funny. They really do have a type, don't they? Of just tough as nails DBs that can tackle. I'm struggling to find a role like where he's going to be right now. I really don't know, because if I look at, not that he wouldn't be on the team, like obviously he'll be on the team, but if we're just trying to project who's actually going to be like the first five on the field, you're going to have Asante and Fulton at corner. I think Cam Hart has better odds of getting snaps outside than Tarheeb. And then at nickel, like maybe he'll, like not even nickel, it'd be dime. Like maybe he compete with Jasir Taylor for dime, and then you have Derwin at nickel, and then at safety, you got Gilman and I guess Finley. Like,
yeah, that third safety spot is a concern for us for sure.
And maybe they would even try Still at safety just to get him on the field. I don't know, but and I just feel like Derwin's so valuable as that quasi safety / nickel role that like I would rather have him down there just where he can make an impact, and then we figure out who's playing like deep safety behind him, and maybe that's where Tarheeb gets on the field. But as far as like, is he going to get on the field as a corner over Cam Hart, over Asante, over Fulton? That's a tough trio to crack for me.
Yeah, we're all really excited about Cam Hart. Outside of the injuries, I think he had like top 60 tape, but 3 shoulder surgeries. That's a tough thing for draft stock. But a lot of Chargers fans also are really, really excited about Brendan Rice. If you had to pick one of these day 3 picks that would be the most likely to bring excess value to this franchise, who would be your selection there?
Honestly, I kind of feel like both Brendan Rice and Cornelius Johnson are going to make the team, which sounds outlandish, say that 2 7th-round rookies are going to make the team in this receiving core, but it's only because it's this receiving core that I think it's even possible. But I think they're going to compete with Darius, and I wouldn't be surprised if they both beat out Darius, because I think what made Darius most attractive to me was the old kickoff return rules, which I don't think favor people of Darius's build anymore, right? Because everything for people that don't know, the kickoff structure looks a lot like the XFL kickoff. So space is a lot more compressed. You're getting the ball a lot closer to your blockers, and therefore a lot closer to the defenders. There's not a big old runway where like a smaller, really fast guy can like kind of burn angles, and like you kind of almost have to be a running back to really succeed in the new return structure. And in the kind of compressed space that we're looking at here, I'm not sure Darius is going to be the same type of kick returner that maybe they thought they were going to be drafting a year ago. So I could see both Brendan and Cornelius beating him out, just because I think they bring more utility, which would then give us a receiving core of Palmer, QJ, Ladd, assuming Chark makes it, Brendan, and Cornelius, if they carry 6. But like, I like both of them a lot. Like, I didn't think either of them were going to be there in the 7th round. They bring different skill sets and everything like that, but they both could legitimately make it.
Yeah, I am curious to see what they view Rice as, because I didn't love his like prototypical X stuff. To me, he's I would say he's better suited like as a backside Z. I don't know your thoughts there, but
No, same.
I think you with Chark and with Cornelius, those are your contested catch, boundary throw guys, and Rice I would say is more of a space eater. You kind of agree with that then?
100%. I think they play different spots. I think, like you said, Brandon's probably a Z. Cornelius, I could see him. I could see him being a better fit at X, not like the starting X, but I could see him kind of being like that backup X receiver. You got Ladd, who also played outside predominantly at Georgia, but he's probably going to be moved around quite a bit. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays a lot of his snaps inside. But yeah, Brendan, I wasn't sure if he had the wiggle to be an X against like legit press corners, let alone in this division. I think he does need a little bit more space, or using him on motion to kind of like back guys off, where he gets a little bit more space to operate. Like to your point, I think that's kind of his best fit, which really means he's going to be like Josh Palmer's backup more so than Chark's.
Yeah, I completely agree there. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Kollmann Vidal. You loved him. I think he was your 5th or 6th overall running back, if I'm not mistaken. And you had some positive things to say about him after they selected him. What do you make of him maybe kind of carving out a role as a 3rd down back, or do you think he is like legit RB1? Is he someone that can do the kickoff return stuff you just mentioned? Where do you see him fitting into this Chargers offense?
If he can track it and catch it, I think they'll try him at kick returner just to get him snaps, right? Just to get him snaps, because on the outset, he's not going to get snaps because, you've got JK, you've got Gus. I still think eventually they're going to see what Isaiah Spiller can do, right? Maybe, because we didn't really get to see it with the previous regime. And so like maybe we'll see what Isaiah so I think Vidal is going to start the year as RB4 and then in contention to be their starting kick returner. But as the year goes on and as attrition hits the position, and knock on wood, but unfortunately these are running backs ahead of him that don't have a great history of staying healthy. As attrition hits the position and he actually starts to get carries, it's going to be harder and harder and harder to get him off the field. And I could see this being not to bring up KC too much in one episode on a Chargers show, but I could see this being similar to like the Isaiah Pacheco situation in Kansas City, right? Where they took him in the 7th round out of the Shrine Bowl a couple of years ago. He shows up to camp, and within 48 hours, like the first 2 practices, for what I was told, they're like, hold on, we got something here, right? Yeah. And then they just kind of kept finding excuses to give him snaps, and then by like middle of the season, they're like, he's our best running back. What can you do, right?
Yeah.
And then of course they win the Super Bowl. But like I kind of feel like we might have that kind of situation here, where once the first game happens where he leads them in touches, I don't know if there's any going back after that, because he's really, really dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they are super, attached to Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins either. Dobbins is basically on the minimum, and Gus is pretty cheap as well. So we really liked Vidal as well, not as much as you did, but he was a fan favorite of ours as well. So last question for me, Brett. Here, this has been great. We really appreciate the time. Reasonable expectations for the Chargers for you in 2024. Obviously, a lot of people have been burned by this team in the past, but it's a new era. Harbaugh, Joe Ortiz, Justin Herbert's healthy. What are your kind of reasonable expectations for this team in 2024?
On the top end, I think they compete for a 7 seed, which even a lot of Chargers fans might not even be expecting that this year, in year 1 of a new regime. But I just look at how they match up against a lot of other teams in the AFC, and they match up pretty well in terms of how I think they're going to run the ball. In terms of how well I think they're going to protect Justin Herbert. Like, how many edge duos in the league do you think are going to have a great time going against Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater? Not a whole lot. So if you give a quarterback the caliber of Justin Herbert 3 seconds to throw, on average, like, I don't care what defense you got, like, he's going to do some damage. And I think that, defensively, I love the system they have this year a lot more than the system they had the previous few years. I love what they've been building in terms of how they've kind of drafted and brought in through free agency the spine of the defense. They kind of built it from the middle out. Obviously, they retained their edge rush, not even duo, but trio, by sacrificing the receivers to the altar of free agency. They kept all their edge rushers. So if they get a lead, like, good luck. So I really do like the pieces they have. They're not going to be an easy team to beat. And I think you're going to look up in early December and they're going to be like, game and a half outside the division and maybe a half game and or tied for the 7 seed. And we're going to be going into the Christmas season and people are going to be like, hold on, the Chargers are actually in this thing. What the hell, right? So I'm not guaranteeing a playoff berth. I think they have a shot. The hard part is just beating out literally any of the AFC North teams. That's the hard part, is getting past the AFC North. They'll get past the Raiders. They'll get past the Broncos. It's the North they got to deal with. And there's 4 killers up there.
I mean, how wild would it be if the last spot? I mean, I assume the Ravens are going to be really good, man. But like, just picturing the Harbaugh battles at the end of the season would be interesting for sure. Interesting storylines. Brett, thanks so much for joining us today, man. Really appreciate it. You've tweeted out a bit of your summer projects and things that you and EJ have cooking up, but what can fans of the show look forward to over the next few months as we get into training camp season in the next little bit here?
Well, I'll tell you what, that wasn't even everything that I have on the docket, because I added some stuff when I reached out to my friends at the NFL. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna throw in a couple extra things here that they can send me, because I got a wild idea yesterday. I was like, you know what? LaDainian Tomlinson had a hell of a 2006.
Yeah, let's go.
So I submitted a request to the NFL. I was like, can you send me every Chargers all 22 from 2006? And they said yes. So that's on the way. So I'm gonna see if I can do a breakdown of all, what was it, like 30 something touchdowns that LaDainian had that year. It was at least 28. So that's on the way.
What a way to break some news about your summer project here on the Guilty as Charged podcast. We love that. Thank you for doing that. Obviously, Chargers fans, make sure and check that one out. I'm really excited for that one. So Brett, appreciate the time, man. Can't thank you enough for the insight. Hopefully you guys listening enjoyed that, because I sure did. And Brett, we'll be in touch, man. Appreciate the time.
Have a good one.